Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. Tonight we got a good show for you. We're going to be talking about this book right here. We're going to look at what is going on. Nailed 10 Christian myths that show Jesus never existed at all, and then some. We got this, and we got other stuff too. And I want to talk about some of these things. And can't just look at one book, so we got to look at multiple books. Hidden wisdom in the Bible? Is there hidden wisdom in the Bible? I don't know. You know, Jacob obeys the command of God. Is this true? I don't know. Let's see. Birth of the 12 tribes. I don't know. I have this book too. So I just don't study one book. I study many. I also have a few other things I've been looking at. Where are they? Oh, yeah. I don't know if you ever got these books. The Paul Wallace books are really, really good. And we should escape from Eden. This was an excellent book. I got a lot of markings in here. Little things that we could really ask ourselves. Have you ever read the Popol Vuh? That is a South American book recounting their myths and like their Bible kind of thing. It's kind of the only thing. When the Spanish went in, they destroyed everything there. That's pretty much the only thing that survived. Let's see. So we're going to get right into this. I hope you're all doing good. I know it takes a few minutes before everybody gets in the chat and shows up. But I don't know where I want to start. Really, there's a lot of places to start from. There's just so much out there. Sometimes it's almost good to have a guest just to shoot around what's going on. Knowing in our bones, there's no doubt they were human. The question wasn't what, is why. Why? We're talking about the Popol Vuh. The ancient Peruvians were more than 3 millennia ago have skulls that were 60% heavier than the average modern human. How interesting. And why did their craniums only have one partial plate? Oh, we're talking about the elongated skulls. How come that is? Did you ever ask yourself that? Which human came first? So, we're going to go and get into this book here. I got a part marked in here. I got a lot of stuff marked in here. Start more in the beginning that I got marked. Who says there is no Jesus? 10 beautiful lies about Jesus. We'll start with them. We'll get them 10 myths clicked right off, and then we can go on to other stuff. By now, you're intent on listening, and you're hearing me babble. After about 3 minutes, you're all in the chat. You're all listening to me like great people should, because you're wanting this great information that I'm providing. And just like the 3 guys standing back there behind me, they're all saying, we're waiting, we're waiting. Anyway, Christianity, like all religious movements, was born from myth making. And nowhere in it's cleaner than we examine the content from which Jesus sprang and supposed historical underpinnings of Jesus, which apologists insist in differences that their Christ from the myriad over other saviors of gods. Yeah, so why is that savior better than the other saviors? It goes on. The quicker it becomes apparent that the figure of this historical Jesus has traveled with a bodyguard of widely accepted, seldom examined untruths for over 2 millennia. 2,000 years. The purpose of this is to believe brief examinations of the shed light on 10 of those beloved Christian myths. 10 beautiful lies about Jesus. Number 1. Let's do this. Number 1, the idea that Jesus was a myth is ridiculous. Number 2, Jesus was widely famous, but there was no reason for contemporary historians to notice him. He was so famous Nobody ever heard of them. Nobody ever wrote anything down. So, number 3, ancient historian Josephus wrote about Jesus. Yeah, because Josephus didn't live back in those days. Anyway, 4, eyewitnesses wrote the Gospels. Not so true. The Gospels were all written 100 years later. The Gospels give a constant picture of Jesus, a consistent picture of Jesus. Not really. Nobody seemed to know what he looked like, and nobody ever drew a picture of him. Go figure. How is that true? History confirms the Gospels. They're all kind of wishy-washy. Archaeology confirms the Gospels. No, they just dug them up. They were all written later. Paul and the Epistles collaborate the Gospels. Or do they? Christianity began with Jesus and his apostles. Did it? Did it begin there? Did Jesus go around saying, "Come on, become a Christian"? No, Jesus was a Jew. And so were his apostles. Were they? Christianity was totally new and different, malicious, overnight success that changed the world. Christianity was a totally new and different, miraculous, overnight success that changed the world. No, it took hundreds of years before Christianity actually caught on and was actually called Christianity. Okay. Who says there was no Jesus? We've already begun. Our first Christian myth is the knee-jerking dismissal of the idea that Jesus may have only been a figure of legend. Unsurprising, apologists take unabridged that the very notion of and declare that historians have always overwhelmingly agreed that Jesus was real. Krampus, the Campus Crusade for Christ minister Josh McDonald gives a prime example of these sorts of dismissive pronouncements in his new book, New Evidence. Yeah, okay. Let's see. It's true enough that the majority of biblical historians do not question the historicality of Jesus, but then again, the majority of biblical historians have always been Christian preachers. Go figure. You're a Christian preacher, you don't want to say he didn't exist. Okay, Jesus versus Julius Caesar. For instance, historian Richard Carrier has pointed out the problems with Christian apologist Douglas Griffith's claim that the evidence for Jesus' resurrection meets the highest standards of historical inquiry, and as certain as Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BC, Carrier notes, while it is common in Christian apologetics throughout history to make absurdly exaggerated claims, that this is no exception. There he compares the evidence for both events. First of all, we have Caesar's own account. In contrast, we have nothing written by Jesus. Yeah, how come Jesus didn't write anything? Didn't he know how to write? Couldn't he get somebody else to write? Seemed like all the other apostles, they knew how to write. He had tons of disciples, and nobody could write anything down for him. But they all knew exactly what he said. And we do not know really who wrote any of the Gospels. Second, many of Caesar's enemies reported the crossing of the Rubicon, but we have no hostile or even neutral records of the resurrection until over 100 years after the supported event. 50 years after Christian beliefs had become widely known. Third, there are numerous inscriptions, coins, mentions of battles, conscriptions, and judgments from which form an almost continuous chain of evidence for Caesar's entire march. But there is no physical evidence of any kind in the case of Jesus. Fourth, almost every historian of the period reports that the Rubicon crossing, including the most prominent of Roman age people. Okay, moreover, these scholars have known proven reliability since a very great many of their reports on other matters have been confirmed with material evidence at their sources. In addition, they were all quoted and named many different sources, showing a wide variety of reading of the witnesses and documents. See, they all had witnesses and documents, written sources, other reports of this crossing of the Rubicon. But not a single historian mentions the resurrection, and until the 3rd and the 4th centuries. And then only Christian historians of the anonymous gospel authors, only Luke even claims to be writing history, but neither Luke nor any of his others cite any of the sources or show signs of a skilled critical examination. Okay, why did the Jews want to kill Jesus? The Gospels give entirely different rationalities for why Jews wanted to kill Jesus dead. After Mark's Jesus heals a man withered hand in early in his career, the Pharisees immediately begin plotting on how they might destroy him. But as Price wearily notes, this is a strange, since Jesus don't get arrested for 11 more chapters, and when he does, the Pharisees have nothing to do with it. And that particular how Jesus healed a whole bunch of people, and this other guy, he heals one guy, and they all want to get rid of him because he did something out of the ordinary. Luke's Jesus runs afoul with the Jewish leaders in the last week of his life, after he drives the money changers from the temple. Yep, about money. The faith of Matthew's Jesus isn't specifically linked to the temple in the incident. Instead, it is sealed in a secret meeting of the chief priests, scribes, and elders around the same time, 2 days before Passover. Incidentally, seemingly omniscient Matthew doesn't just know the details of various secret meanings of Jesus' enemies. He also knows things such as what angels say to Joseph in his dreams. That guy was knowing a lot of stuff. See, it's all plotted out like a storybook. How can that be? These are real people and real accounts. And how does he know? Of course, John's Jesus starts his 3-year career with the temple cleansing incident. So when the wicked Jews do get around to planning to kill Jesus, it is nothing to do with the temple or the incident with the money changers, but because he raised Lazarus from the dead, an event that doesn't even occur in other gospels. So it wasn't even accounted. All I can say is, see, it seems like all these guys had different accounts, but nobody really accounted on the same account. So it's like, yeah, I recall him doing that. I never heard of that. How about you? But I remember him doing this. So you got all these guys remembering him doing different things, but nobody did the same thing. Why did Judas betray him? Here's another one. Motives for Judas betraying him range from none at all, to possession by Satan, or to petty theft. Petty theft and possession by Satan. Luke and John even claim to know the exact amount, the exact moment when Satan enters Judas' heart, though they don't agree when this was, or say how they or anyone else could know this. How did they know? When did they know? What? At the Last Supper, they're sitting there and saying, "Hey, buddy, I think Satan just entered him." That could be a good comedy skit. When was Jesus born? The years of Jesus' birth and death are irresolvable. A contradiction. If Luke is right when he states that Jesus was born in 6 CE, then Matthew cannot be right when he just as plainly states that Jesus was born sometime before 4 BCE. And even on the way, we're found to make Matthew and Luke agree on the year Jesus was born. The two nativity stories still contradict one another at every point. By their own statements, they exclude each other. They simply cannot both be correct. You got two stories from two different guys about the same thing, and they got all their stuff wrong. How is this possible? When did Jesus die? Similarly, no one can say for certain what year Jesus died. As mentioned before, it is a guessing game. It has to be during Pilate's prefecture on a year when Passover fell on a Friday. That is, if the synoptics are right and John is wrong. If he's right that Jesus died on Friday, the day before Passover, which tells us repeatedly, then all the other Gospels are wrong. So what is it? And incidentally, we know that what day Cleopatra put an ASP to her breast. We know what time Mount Vesuvius erupted and destroyed Pompeii. That was August 24th, 79 CE, between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. So how can we figure that kind of stuff out? We know that Julius Caesar forgot to beware the Ides of March and bumped into Brutus on the 15th, 44 BCE. So why don't we know the actual date that Jesus died or entered triumphantly into Jerusalem? We drove the money changer or drove the money changers from the temple, or raised Lazarus from the dead, or any other spectacular events. Yeah, all these spectacular events. Of course. Why do we know the day or even the year? Any event in Jesus' life. You were there the day the sky opened and the angels received Jesus as he ascended into heaven. Wouldn't you remember that for the rest of your life? Wouldn't you put that date down? Wouldn't you say, yeah, that was on a Thursday? You know, we record the simplest, stupidest things. I mean, even you can remember your birthday most of the time. You can, you remember the day, at least the year. It's like, oh, I remember when I graduated. Yeah, and I remember the day. Maybe not so much the day, but I know it was in May. It was at the end of May or the beginning of May. I think it was at the end of May. Middle to the end of May. Can't really put a date on it. But I do remember graduate. I do remember the day. I do remember them going there. I remember stepping on that stage. See, I remember the year. But they can't remember the year, the date. These guys who were supposedly right there can't remember. Nobody else remembered either. Not even for the big events. I wonder if Lazarus remembers being brought back from the dead. You think he would have wrote that down? Wrote a book about it or something. Or told everybody, on the 16th of February, I was raised from the dead. Something like that. Of course, there's still more discrepancies on basic and important matters, such as his relationship to John the Baptist. Were they perfect strangers? First cousins? Did they even live in the same time? There's accounts of his final weeks, his trial, his death, resurrection, and ascension. It is no exaggeration to say that the four Gospels contradict each other from before Jesus' birth to after his death and nearly every juncture in between, and it has not been lost on scholars over the years. So everybody has a different account of what year, what day, Just like Christmas. Is it Christmas Day? Is it the 25th? Really? How long have we been celebrating on the 25th? How is it that the 25th is also the 3 days of darkness of the year? And, you know, the resurrection's always in the spring. Yeah, doesn't that just seem a little bit coincidental? The discrepancies are many and multitude, and at times concern issues so fundamental that at first glance one might think they are spoke of totally different events and personalities. It looks as if Jesus in Mark were not the same person as Jesus in John. They speak differently, act differently, die differently. The portrayals of Jesus vary so widely that biblical historians have been able to reconstruct dozens of historical Jesuses in their own image, all equally plausible and perfectly contradictory. And all attempts to sift through textual criticisms or tease out the real Jesus seem to ignore one nagging problem. Not only do the four Gospels give us four very different and incompatible Jesuses, they appear to do so quite deliberately. Historians take such liberties with real people and events, but storytellers and myth makers do. So, this is the state of the Gospels. Four contradictory, convoluted, and reworked writings set down decades after the supposed events by unknown authors, or authors falsely being passed off as eyewitnesses, and all primarily derived from the single source, which, as we'll see, appears to be entirely literally fiction. See, that's the thing. If you write about a real place and a mythical person in a time that's real, with places that are real, how can you distinguish it from non-real people or real places in the end? See, that's where things really get kind of weird. And you gotta kind of wonder. So, anyway, with all of that, we gotta get on the page of, you know, who does what when, you know, and then figure it out. History confirms the Gospels, did they? If historians reliably the Gospel, okay. As mentioned before, Luke is the only evangelist to even claim to be recording history, and this is demonstrably a lie, since there are plentiful evidence that Luke was acting as a historical novelist, not a historical reporter. Yes, there's a difference. I'm writing about historical events that are made up, and then I'm writing about historical events that actually happened because I was there. See, that's the difference. Yeah, what can you say? Then he enthusiastically, but often inaccurately, mined from the work of actual historian Josephus and others, including Homer and the Greek playwright Euphrates, for historical details, geographical notes, and famous individuals he could insert into the story in order to give the whole work an air of authenticity. See, that's the thing. He knew people, he knew events and places and things like that, so he puts it all together, and then you can't tell the difference. Now, his defenders today still latch onto these little snippets of historical details, triumphantly hold them as proof of his incredible accuracy, conveniently ignore his mistakes and outright falsehoods, such as when he goes too far and includes historical details that are extremely dubious, if not outright impossible, such as Paul meeting Agrippa and Bernice in Acts 25, 23, 26, 32, an event that Agrippa's close friend Flavius Josephus would certainly have mentioned if true, or anachronistic events that actually happened long after the time he claims they did, such as those described in Gamaliel's speech in Acts 5:34-37. Luke also betrays unfamiliarity with basic facts of Judaism. Palestine geography, when he natively repeats Mark's numerous mistakes without comment, and has Paul saying things like, I belong to the strictest sect of our religion and lived as a Pharisee. Acts 26:5. If Luke was really acquainted with the Judaism, he would have known that even a Pharisee would admit that the Essenes were a far stricter sect. If Paul ever said anything like this, he was either lying or grossly mistaken. Lastly, for someone presented as a traveling companion of the Apostle Paul, he really needs to do some homework. Luke repeatedly gets facts about Paul wrong and contradicts the facts given in his episides. Luke is eager to give his gospel and respectably of a genuine historical account, but he exhibits none of the qualities of real historian, not even by the standards of historians from his own time. His research appears limited to picking scenic period details from other writers and using them to spruce up a rewrite of Mark's gospel based on his own theological slant. So, like I said, if you know the area and you kind of know of it, and you write about it, you read some other people's stuff, you could probably make a really good story. Just think about it. It's like the Chat GPT. You put the headlines in there, and then guess what? You put it in, and it writes you a story because it's got all the other details, even though the story ain't even real. It's fake. It's written by a computer. Okay. Let's see. In Inexplicable Acts. The book of Acts also contains a number of features that don't make sense from any of the gospel stories that are true. After Jesus' death, his right-hand man, Peter, amazes Jerusalem by healing a well-known local beggar, lame from birth, 3:11, and is arrested. The court is Smythe. Peter's miracle has been so conspicuous that everyone in Jerusalem has heard about it, and there's no denying it. What can they do? But hold on a minute. All this consideration over Peter healing a cripple, that's the only miracle that has Jerusalem all abuzz. That is a miracle of the chief priest. Why would he want to hide from the public? What about all of Jesus' miracles and healings? What about the pair of rock-splitting earthquakes, worldwide darkness, and angels? Hasn't anyone noticed the temple curtain is ripped in half? Have they? All the resurrected saints that have filled Jerusalem. Jesus returned from the dead for 40 days, and then ascended into heaven. Shouldn't have anyone still be talking about that? If any of these stories was true in the first place, the court concerns make no sense at all, unless Peter's modest healing was the only notable miracle that had occurred up to this time. All of the trial accounts in Acts, Peter, Stephen, and Paul, share the same bizarre memory lapse. None of the Roman authorities have any notion who this Jesus person is. There's not the slightest hint that he was renowned throughout Palestine, condemned and executed by the authorities, that his body disappeared, or that he had been spotted in the Jerusalem area alive again for 40 days. If Luke is to be believed in the real world, if condemned criminal was discovered somehow alive again, the authorities would simply do a better job of making sure that he and all his accomplices were executed properly. And such an unprecedented roundup would have attracted considerable attention. Instead, we find the Roman authorities, the question of Jesus is nothing but some obscure Jewish religious dispute. Ah, yes. And it is not just Rome with the amnesia, but Paul's Jesus is just his invisible friend, the talking light in the sky. All that Paul knows about Jesus is what Moses and the prophets revealed in the scriptures, that the Christ would suffer, rise from the dead, and proclaim light to all. He never hints that any of this just occurred recently in Jerusalem, or that anyone witnessed it. In fact, while Paul was making his defense, Festivus makes it clear to the source of Paul's gospel in Hebrew scriptures when he claims, "You are out of your mind, Paul. Too much learning is driving you insane." And with that insane thought, I'm thinking I'm going to drop it right there. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. That was kind of interesting and right to the point. Makes you think. But if you want to learn more about it, get this book, read it. It's pretty cool. Makes you think about, did this really happen or not? You can read it in the Bible, but you can't read it anywhere else because it just doesn't exist. Even the Romans didn't know about it. Not until they read about it in the book, apparently. I bet you they were fuming mad when they started reading about it and go, wow, that's some character. How come we never heard of that guy? How come there's nothing wrote about that guy? Interesting. So with that, remember, go out and do something nice for somebody else. You know, if you're doing good, spread it around. Be more than you are. Remember to be the frequency you want to receive, everyone. I love you all. Peace, everybody.